Let's talk to Victor. Hi, Victor. You're on the Atheist Experience. What would you like to talk about today?
Hi, thank you for taking me at the end of the show.
Yeah, we gotcha.
I am, a very weak theist. I don't count myself as a Christian. I don't buy into the Bible. I don't claim any of that kind of stuff. And I don't claim. I don't accept, like the Kalam. I don't accept this idea that God is more likely than a multiverse. But what I really have an issue with, and I guess let me first state my issue, and then I need to give a little bit of explanation of my concept of God.
Sure.
Is that I believe that the evidence, and I only count it as evidence. I don't create a syllogism for it. Effectively, only one premise is our sense of morality, and it's not that God commands us to be moral, but that my best estimate is that God, having created us in some way that I'm not really sure, is concerned for us. And because of God's concern for us, he wants us to be concerned about the rest of his creation. Let me, if I could expand upon my notion of God briefly.
Sure.
Hello?
I got loads of questions already, but one of them is,
Yeah, me too.
what are the features of your God? So let's do it.
Yeah, well, because like I said, I don't claim to be a Christian. I don't buy into the biblical God. I actually consider the Bible to be a lot of crazy stuff and kind of abominable.
Just get to the features of your God, because we're running low on time.
Yeah. The God is that I believe in is not omnipotent, not perhaps omnibenevolent, but probably merely benevolent is my claim. And the God did not create everything. I believe that there is a greater creation, that God is somehow came out from this greater, what I consider indifferent creation. But whatever the case, and this God, I agree with you, Matt, about the concept of well-being as the basis for morality. And this same God is actually subject to that basis. So it's not a matter of divine command theory. It's a matter of God.
Okay, Victor, I think I'm going to stop you there just because there was already a significant amount of content. I'll give Matt a sec, but my first question would be, did you just construct this God yourself intuitively based on the types of things that you want to believe based on observation? Like, is this a whole cloth idea that you created yourself?
It's my observation of things, and like the one thing that I cannot quite get around is the full extent to which we actually care about others. I realize that, in most cases, for almost all humans, it matters.
Right.
But particularly, like, to consider, I know something that, Matt, you would have said a number of times, is you would be willing to take Jesus's suffering, all of the torture, killing on the cross, and be dead after that forever, and get nothing out of it if it would be, to end suffering in the world. And I don't see how anyone can, how that kind of altruism can come from merely it being in your best interest in the end.
Okay, I have a lot.
Yeah, go.
So first of all, when you say, I don't see how, that is an argument from ignorance, or argument from personal incredulity fallacy. Whether or not you can see how, to get to altruism is irrelevant. But you agreed that well-being is the foundation of morality. And if well-being is the foundation of morality, then a God becomes completely irrelevant. You can't make a moral argument because God isn't required. All that's required are the facts about well-being, and those are the same whether or not there's a God or whether or not a God cares about us. So then we have to go to the features of your God. And so just to make this as easy as possible, how do you know that God is not omnipotent?
Oh, problem of evil. I mean, if there were, well, no, the God that I'm referring to is not. There is, because this God is benevolent, and
You're okay, Victor. You are not answering my question. I have here a list of your features of God. God is not omnipotent.
Okay.
God is perhaps omnibenevolent, but at least benevolent. God didn't create everything. God came out of a different creation. Those are the 5 points that you gave as features for your God. So I'm asking you, point one, you say God is not omnipotent. How do you know that?
Right.
Yeah.
There's just too much chaos and everything. And I mean, I suppose there's a chance that there's a higher God who is omnipotent and completely doesn't care about anything,
Victor,
with respect to us. What?
Victor, I'm sorry, but when I ask you, how do you know that God is not omnipotent? Saying there's too much chaos and everything is not a response. What does chaos in something have to do with whether or not there is an omnipotent God? And how silly is it to say, I don't think that God is omnipotent, but maybe there's a super God that is? I mean, I don't want to just be insulting, but if you're going to list off the properties of your God, you've got to actually be able to defend those. So let's skip how you know God is not omnipotent, because the correct answer is you don't know that. So how do you know that there's a God that is at least benevolent?
Like I said, that there is benevolence in the universe is one thing.
No, there's not. What benevolence is there in the universe that you could attribute to a God?
Well, like I said, that we care for one another.
I get credit for being benevolent. No. Victor, stop. You do not get to look at me and Shannon and say, you two are benevolent, therefore there's a benevolent God. That's bullshit. I want to know how you know there's a God that is benevolent.
Well, there are good things that in the universe, like, you know, there's a lot of beauty in the universe, despite the fact that there's also
beauty isn't benevolent. Beauty isn't benevolent, and you haven't demonstrated that beauty comes from God. Plus, you just said that one of your things is that God didn't create everything, so you don't get to look at the fucking things in the universe and give God credit for them. Your theology is so absolutely confused. You are just absolutely pulling shit out of thin air with no logical basis for any of it. You don't know whether or not there is a God. You don't know whether or not that God is omnipotent. You don't know whether or not that God is benevolent. The truth is, you look around the universe and you see things, and you want to attribute those things to God. But then when push comes to shove, you know that you don't have a defense of God, which is why you're going to say, maybe our God isn't the super God. Maybe there's another God. And well-being is the foundation of morality, but I think we need a God for that. You are all over the place, and nothing you're saying is rational, supported by evidence. It is all, here's my gut feels on what I think a God is.
Yeah, I'm just gonna chime in for 1 second, because Matt kind of mirrored what I was gonna say. Because what I'm gleaning from the conversation is that you've realized that all of, like, the texts and religions that you've been exposed to don't make sense, but you still have this inclination to lean on God to explain things that you can't readily understand, like this sort of latent urge to say, like, if something seems mysterious or unexplainable to me, then I'm going to try to tie that to a God for some reason. And that's why it's kind of coming off as a little bit, kind of like disorganized.
Yeah. I wanted to get to just one thing. Like, how do you know that God's benevolent? And your answer was, well, there appear to be good things in the universe that are good, but you already said that God didn't create this. How do you know that God didn't create this?
I didn't say that God didn't create the whole universe. I'm not really sure that if there is.
Then can you tell me
God is
what
the universe?
Pick something in the universe. Pick anything in the universe that you are convinced is from a God, and tell me why.
I like that question.
Well, the only thing, and I'm not even sure I'd use the word convinced, but the main thing is, like I said, is our sense of morality.
But okay,
And
so
again,
here's the thing, Victor.
comes from
Victor,
yeah.
when you say our sense of morality, do you and I agree on morality?
Probably not entirely, but to a large extent, from what I've
Then we don't really have a sense of morality between us. And so let's pick something we agree on, like it's wrong to murder someone.
Okay, I agree.
Cool. Why is it wrong?
Yeah, that one is easy. I mean, that one does not need a God because it's bad for society.
Okay, so
it's wrong to be murdered. Then I might get killed myself, and I prefer that.
But Victor, what I want to bring your awareness to right now, though, like I just want to bring this while we're in this moment, I want to bring your awareness to the fact that you said, well, not that one. So anything, it seems as though, like I said before, you're utilizing God when things become ambiguous or difficult to explain.
So you say the moral prescription on murder doesn't require God. Cool.
Right.
So now you're admitting that there are parts of morality that don't require God. So the next question becomes, what part of morality does require a God?
And then I'm going to guess that it's when it becomes a little bit more gray.
Your willingness. I gave the example of your willingness to undergo extreme suffering and die and be forever and get no benefit from it, so that the rest of the world can end suffering.
Why does that require a God? And how do you demonstrate that that position is morally correct?
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, the demonstration I don't think is something that I can actually demonstrate because, like I said, I think it's the moral sense. But the point is,
but we don't have the same moral sense. We don't have the same moral sense. And so it's funny that in an area where you and I agree on morality, you're like, yep, no God required there. And I'm just wondering if the only places where we disagree are things where you think a God's required. For example, are trans women women?
I would say probably. I mean, I'm not
okay. I guess that is a position that's not necessarily moral. Is it morally permissible for people? Hang on. Is it morally permissible for people of the same gender to get married?
For morally, I'm fine with that.
Sure. And is there a God required to reach that conclusion?
No.
Okay. So then where are we at? Is abortion morally permissible?
That's a little harder to deal with because, yeah, I do think in terms of, are we maybe possibly killing an unborn? But I mainly fall on that the imposition is too great on women, which is why, for the most part, I'm pro-choice.
So where is there a moral thing that you think requires a God? Because my altruism, you haven't even demonstrated is moral or that it would happen. The point here is that you called in essentially to argue on behalf of a God because of our sense of morality. And then it turns out we don't have a shared sense of morality that is completely shared. But to the extent that we share them, whenever we come up with examples, you don't think those require God. And I can tell you that for example, fundamentalist Christians who are opposed to trans rights and gay marriage and abortion, they think that God is responsible and the foundation for those moral views. And so you and I are in agreement that no God is required. And yet you're calling in to argue for a non-omnipotent God that's probably benevolent, that didn't create everything, that came out of some other creation. So now you've got a multi-layer problem here, and who is kind of responsible for some moral views, but isn't the foundation of morality. I like genuinely, none of this makes any sense. It argues against itself.
Yeah, and I agree with Matt, and I have one question for you before we let you go. Can you give me one thing that you think of as a moral fact that you can't provide actual, like, cognitive reasons for, like that you can't think your way to the reason why and
Right.
justify why it's a moral fact, because then maybe you could demonstrate that we need a God. But I've never encountered something that somebody stated was moral or otherwise that wasn't then supported by sufficient or sometimes insufficient reasons.
Well, I don't claim any moral facts. But we have,
Where are we at here then?
I think, all of us.
So you're saying then, so what you're saying then is anything that you propose that you would propose as moral, you can, you can use your words and your reason to support why you think it's moral,
And I have an answer, but I'll go.
Well,
right?
First of all, like I said, I don't dispute with you on moral facts. I dispute with you on the way, because our sense of morality, and again, since it comes from a God who is not omnipotent,
it doesn't come from a God.
By our sense of selfishness. That's my proposition, what I'm saying.
Okay, no, stop. I have an answer to this, which will hopefully end all your confusion, because you seem to think that the only thing you could come up with really that was a moral issue that you thought required God was my altruism or my expression of altruism. But here's the thing. I've already pointed out how you can get from pure selfishness to that altruistic position. And this is incredibly simple, because me willing to make the world better benefits more than just me. And if we lived in a world where the question to ask is, what would the world be like if everyone was willing to do certain things and if everyone held certain views? And if everybody in the world held my view that they would be willing to die if it meant everybody else stopped suffering, means that now we have a world that is entirely populated with people who are willing to take steps to stop suffering, which means my death will probably become unnecessary because we're actually working cooperatively. In a world with people who are willing to sacrifice, who are willing to put the welfare of their family members ahead of themselves, the welfare of their loved ones, their neighbors, and the entire world ahead of themselves, is a world where people are, in fact, actually working cooperatively, rather than a world where I'm just out for me and consequences be damned. But even in a purely selfish sense, if I want a better world for me, it's in my best interest to play along cooperatively with the other people on the planet and to do things for them, even if there's not an immediate apparent benefit to me, because I will do better in society if society views me as a decent person willing to sacrifice for them. And that's all you need to justify that sort of altruistic position. You don't need a God.
That you would be dead if. I mean,
I would be dead, and I would be
that-
dead. I would be dead, and the world and the other people that I care about and I value would be better off, assuming we could, in this magic scenario. Meanwhile, in the interim, my expression of willingness to do that benefits me every day because I look less selfish and less horrible than the religious individuals out there who are trying to dictate what people can do with their lives and in their bedroom. I care more about the real issues of reality than the religious people do. There is nothing that you can say where doing the right thing doesn't actually benefit someone. The notion of altruism is true altruism is, I think, false. All we have are actions where someone has considered that the world will be better off if they take this action. And if you were to convince me that you could put an end to hunger, and you could prove it conclusively, and the end to hunger was conditioned upon my death, then of course I would do it. If for no other reason, and I hadn't even really thought about this, I think in one example I did mention, even if there was no clear upside for me, but you don't think I'm not going to enter into the history books as the person who ended suffering?
I guess that has a value to it, but
I guess so. And if in fact the rest of my family, and if in fact the rest of my family benefits, why isn't that enough?
I still have a hard time buying into the idea of the rest of my family if I'm dead and have no knowledge of it?
You have the knowledge beforehand.
Guy, he's
You-
not
you-
going to arbitrarily sacrifice himself without any guarantees.
Yeah, it is conditioned upon a guarantee that these are the consequences of this action, which is
Mhm.
why it's really easy to say, because it's incredibly unlikely. It's a fantasy scenario. Nobody's ever going to come and say, you know what? If you die, Matt,
Exactly.
nobody in the world will ever hunger again. It is nothing but a thought experiment. But do I do things for other people that nobody knows about? Yeah, I've done lots of things where I'm the only one who knows what beneficial thing I've done for somebody else. So what did I get out of it? The good feeling of helping somebody else, because I share a world with them, and as their life improves, my life improves.
Gosh.
No God required.
Yeah. Well, to me, it seems like it's just a good feeling.
What's wrong with good
And I'm not
feelings?
disputing that you should do it. Because I don't see where the good feeling comes from.
The good where do all feelings come from? Shannon?
Well, yeah, the brain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you
sorry,
have any
there was a
reason to
dog
think,
barking.
Right.
if I do something and I feel good,
Yeah.
why on earth would you take me doing something and feeling good and attribute that to a God that you don't seem to know anything about?
Yeah. Again, it all comes down to, I really do. It does sound to me like you're just trying to whole cloth construct a God to explain things that seem difficult to initially grasp intuitively.
But we're like almost 20 minutes past time.
I know. And I have a dog that has just
I
come
don't-
in here to bark in my face.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
So
my
call us back another time.
Okay.
Call us back another time and have a better defense of the properties that you're advocating, because I can't prove you wrong. As far as I can tell, you've got an unfalsifiable proposition, but I don't see any reason to think that you're remotely correct.
Same.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a good day.
Thanks, Victor. Have a good day. Bye.